You know, when it comes to reinventing, rebooting, reimagining movies sometimes, you know, depending on who the studio is that does it or the people that distribute it, does it, it's always a unique kind of venture to see exactly how different things will be or how similar they will be. One of the things that two of the people I subscribe to here on YouTube, James Rolfe of Cinemassacre and Zara Nizarak of Multimedia Chronicles, talk about a lot, is the differences when it comes to the horror films, mostly traditional horror films from the 30s up until even now. And basically I guess you could say two of the main event players that they talk about when it comes to horror films, and basically the identicalness that connects them, is Universal and Hammer. Now, Universal, of course, has been known to try to keep the horror genre of traditional Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, Bride of Frankenstein, Invisible Man, Invisible Woman, and so on. They've tried to keep it to a level that, you could give it a rating that allows people to a certain age, I guess, to go and see it. And even though you might have disturbing imagery in it, it's still suitable for everybody to watch. I mean, the classic 1930s to 40s films obviously are suitable for everybody, or else they wouldn't be selling them. I mean, heck, my mom, one time in a conversation, I guess somebody brought up the whole classic monster genre and all that, and she was cool with that. It sounded like she was cool with the Frankenstein, that of the Frankenstein and Dracula and all that of the 1930s and so on. But I can guarantee you this. If she was to choose between the different sets of, not just different sets, but the different interpretations and sets, I should say, of movies based on these iconic monsters and everything and iconic stories, between Hammer's version and Universal's version, she would choose Universal, without a doubt. Because when you take a look at Hammer more along the lines from the 50s up to the 70s and early 80s, and even nowadays, will take iconic stories like Dracula, like Frankenstein, like the Wolfman, like Bride of Frankenstein, the Invisible Woman, the Invisible Man, and so on, the Mummy, and so on, and they will take it to a whole different level of terror. They would take it to a whole different level of horror. And that's no exaggeration. That is no exaggeration, because even back when they started doing this in the 50s up to today, they don't shy away. They don't shy away from anything. But here's the thing, though. When you have someone like Universal take on the Mummy series in some different incarnation, whether it's the Brendan Fraser ones, the ones that spun off the Scorpion King with The Rock, and so on, or even the one they just brought out with Tom Cruise, which was supposed to be the start to the Dark Universe, their cinematic entry into the cinematic movie universes, they always try to play it safe. Like, they can have the scary moments, the jump scares and stuff like that, but they always try to play it to the point that, like I said, everybody can sit back and enjoy it, and it would warrant them getting a PG-13 rating. Hammer, on the other hand, a lot of their films, when they brought them out, the MPAA wasn't a big deal, or wasn't even in existence at the time when they began, but they were slowly, I guess, coming into existence, or at least being considered. They were at least being considered and everything. But when Hammer started doing this, every film was not rated. It was not given a rating. So you could basically be like, in your own mind, be the judge of, okay, is this appropriate to take my kids to? Is this appropriate to, go alone and see, depending on what you can handle or what your kids can handle. But as time went on and the MPAA came into existence, a lot of these films obviously got that PG or R rating. Some, surprisingly, and this is the damn truth, got a G rating. And we're not just talking Hammer, we're talking Universal as well. But over time, the MPA, or the MPAA as it was known back then, the MPA has basically adjusted the ratings for a lot of these films. So even if someone like the original Dracula film in the 1930s with Bela Lugosi, or the I think it was Bela Lugosi that did Dracula, right? Or was it? No, Bela Lugosi I think was no, who was yeah, it was Bela Lugosi that was Dracula, and Boris Karloff, Boris Karloff as Frankenstein. Back in the 30s, these films didn't, like I said, didn't have a rating, but now upon re-releases, they're getting things like a PG or PG-13 rating, at most, because of the imagery, because of what they show and stuff, the dark tone and all that. But the Hammer films, there's no doubt most of them get R ratings. Some might get a PG-13, but most, because of the imagery and the reimagining in a more horrific, disturbing direction of these classic iconic characters, are going to get an R rating. There's no getting around that. But the question obviously is, why would a studio like Hammer want to go in a direction instead of just leave it as is? Well, quite simple. When you see someone like a Dracula character, or a Frankenstein character, or even a Wolfman, or someone that can turn invisible, or someone that's a mummy, going on a rampage, or basically, whatever, like the invisibility power, being able to, go anywhere they want without being noticed. Of course, if you're a Hammer, you're going to want to take advantage of that and say, hey, this character should be out for vengeance, or this character should start losing their minds because the power and visibility is making them too unstable and they're just going to go crazy. And we need to really up the ante to show how much of a threat they are. And that's basically what Hammer does. Hammer basically will take these iconic stories and turn it up to the 100th degree, just to basically say this is how it should be presented, if you're doing a film. And you also got to understand too, Hammer, when they did this in the 50s up until the 70s, 80s, and even recently, the reason they, turn it up the reason they turn it up, to that 100th degree is basically they see the potential of how, gory this could be. Because when you read the books based on these characters, these are horror books. Yeah, they're great novels and everything, even from the very first one that they did, which, believe it or not, this year apparently marks, or was it last year? Or in the past year or so, marks 100 years since the first film was brought out based on Dracula. One of the more iconic films. They look at these and they see the potential of the horror elements that are utilized, but they see, hey, this could be they could see that, hey, yeah, these are based on iconic stories, but they could be taken to a whole new level. Like, we could really go crazy, go to town and everything. And that's what they do. That's what they do. They go straight to town. They don't take, any, they don't, how do I put this? They don't take any soft curves. They don't, stall themselves. They don't reconsider. From what I've understood and everything, they just go balls to the walls with a lot of these films. And that basically, from the 50s up until even now, is one of the reasons they allow these kind of films to be, made under their label. Because they could see the potential of, hey, a horror film should be a horror film, not just some horror film that doesn't have much horror in it, and then just has a story overlapping it or overshadowing it. If a horror film's a horror film, let it be a horror film. And that's why you see a lot of these films, distributed by the likes of Hammer, going in that direction that you wouldn't think they would go in. I mean, I'm not saying anything about, the original Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, Invisible Man, Invisible Woman films and all that, done by Universal back in the 30s and 40s. Not saying they didn't take it far. They took it as far as they could. But nowadays, like I said, you still see the horror elements and everything, but those are tame. But by today's standards, those are tame. I mean, yeah, they still try to retain that when they try to redo the Dark Universe, or try to create the Dark Universe, which apparently they're still attempting to do. But, even though they try to retain those elements that, like I said, would make it suitable for everybody, they did basically, back in the original runs, they did basically have the moments. They had their scares and jump scares and all that, but still, you know, those movies, those moments and everything pale in comparison to what Hammer did, or studios like Hammer would do in their interpretations. But the question, obviously, as I was trying to get to before I kind of almost went off track there, which I do apologize. But basically, the question I think anybody has is, how was or is Hammer or any studio able to do this? Since Universal owns the rights to the monsters. Well, here's the thing: Universal owns the rights to the movies, to their interpretations and their versions of the movies based on these iconic characters, which is why they're able to do the Dark Universe and everything, or at least try to attempt to do it one more time. But the stories overall are public domain. So by being public domain, these stories can be interpreted in any shape, form, or fashion. And there have been studios that have done that outside of Hammer and outside of Universal. But here's the catch, though. Studios like Hammer and outside of Universal, studios like them and other independent films studios and distributors, they always find a way around the legal situation. Like, let's say they're doing a more horrific, balls to the wall, gory Dracula film. We know it's based on that when you see it, it's based on Dracula, but they don't refer to Dracula by name or even dress him similar to what you would associate with the Universal films, because they don't want to deal with any legal lawsuits or that. They don't want to deal with any litigation, coming from Universal saying, hey, you copied our film. Instead, they'd rather work side by side with Universal like they've done before to try to make a movie, as identical to the iconic story by Mary Shelley. Well, not Mary Shelley, but the iconic story of Dracula, or the iconic story written by Mary Shelley of Frankenstein, as they could, as they can, instead of dealing with legal issues. And if they can't, and they decide to distribute it on their own through another label and all that, they always try to find a way to work around the fact that, yeah, this is based on Dracula, or this is based on the Wolfman, this is based on Frankenstein, this is based on the Invisible Man or Invisible Woman. They always try to find a way to get around that. Which is why when you always see a lot of these, Invisible People movies that have come out in the past couple of years, yeah, they will straight up have the names Invisible Man, but they'll find a way in story to, I guess you could say, scoot around the idea of not being associated or being the same, character or story as what Universal had originally adapted and still has the rights to. That's why with some of the comedy films involving this, like Mom's Out of Sight, Invisible Mom, Invisible Kid, they always change it up. It's always like it's the same story of, okay, person finds invisibility formula, they have fun with it and all that, but they don't, try to associate it in any shape, form, or manner to the original monster film that Universal owns the rights to. Same with Frankenstein. Again, Hammer could get around it by calling Frankenstein, or the Frankenstein monster, the creature. Alvin and the Chipmunks, believe it or not, when they did Chipmunks Go to the Movies, and I think they did their version of it, can call it Frankenmonk, to avoid any confusions. And yeah, even when they did Alvin and the Chipmunks Meet Frankenstein, or Alvin and the Chipmunks Meet the Wolfman, yeah, these were identical to the Universal monsters. And here's the catch, though. The reason they were able to kind of keep it identical and Universal didn't come after the people that the Battle of Gadsden Productions, or whatever the names are, of Alvin and the Chipmunks, is because they worked side by side with Universal to make that happen. Outside of that, though, if they wanted to do it under somebody else's distributing or their own distributing, they'd have to come up with a different way to tell the story of how the Chipmunks and Chipettes met Frankenstein, or how the Chipmunks and Chipettes met the Wolfman. They'd have to find their own way to do it. And they did it kind of like, and they kind of did that here with these two crossovers that they did. They had their own story elements to it. But the point I'm getting at, though, is when other studios like Hammer decide to do their own versions, they have to find a way to work around it so that it's not like a straight up connection to the original Universal stories, which, you know, is a good move. It's a good move on their part. But it also, by doing so, allows them to go in a direction that Universal, yeah, they will go in if they have to, but not necessarily, because they want to have those stories be for everybody. They want the stories to be for everyone to enjoy. So the biggest difference when it comes to both versions of these iconic monsters, you know, the big difference in closing here is one independently outside of Universal, you know, is basically able to take it to a whole new level, balls to the wall, you know, horrific goriness that Universal will touch upon, but not as much because they want people to, you know, overall enjoy it with family and friends. But Hammer, they'll be like, you know, screw that, bam, here we go. And, you know, they won't shy away from the gore, they won't shy away from the violence. They will just go, boom, balls to the wall. And they don't care if maybe the ending is a bittersweet, depressing ending, like in some of the films. Like when Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed, they won't, even though it's not the end, but it's close to it. You know, they won't shy away from it. Universal, they may touch upon it, but not really. You know, they may be like, you know, they may say something in the next scene to where off screen, so and so found the body of the husband who they thought was alive buried underneath a house, and it's like they'll touch upon it and that's it. You know, but Hammer, studios like Hammer will not shy away from it. So to me, you know, when you look at the difference between the two, Hammer is more willing to go crazy. Just, you know, take the gloves off and just go, you know, like I said, and I know people are tired of me repeating myself sometimes, I do apologize. But they will just go crazy, balls to the wall, nuts with it. Well, Universal might touch upon it, but try to keep it to where everybody will be able to watch it. And that's just my opinion. That's just my opinion on it. But let me know what your thoughts are. Comment down below, live chat during the premiere, like the video, and if you were to choose between both sides, because like I said, if my mom was to be asked, okay, which versions would you choose? You know, she would go Universal over Hammer, no doubt. But let me know what your thoughts are. Comment below, live chat during the premiere, which, you know, version would you go with? And is there probably someone a lot more, you know, balls to the wall, crazier than Hammer when it comes to their interpretations of these iconic movies and monsters and all that, you know, that we watch or that get broadcast during the time of Halloween, which is this month. Let me know what your thoughts are. Comment below, live chat during the premiere, like the video, super chat, super stickers are open during the live chat, and super thanks after the premiere. Check me out at BW Rose's Discussions, all your favorite audio podcast locations except for Pandora. Also check me out at Venmo at Brian-Warmer-2 and Cash App at BWRoses98. Also check me out at DeviantArt.com/BVW1979. Patreon.com at BWRoses with a $1 or $3 tier. Check out the Teespring store as well. Let me know what your thoughts are though, guys, and I will talk to y'all later.